and you can see here I can stop the recording or pause, and I'm going to start working again with blend mode. So I've already started my file in Photoshop, and talking about basic blend modes here, I'm going to use this wrinkled paper bag, which is rather monochromatic. It's brown. I'm going to select all and copy it, and then I'll close this file and come into my existing file and paste. Command V, and Command T is what I will use to resize this. If you're not familiar with key commands, and you're not a big lover of key commands, I'll do some things within the menu, but for the most part I will use key commands and tell you what they are because I find them to be really efficient. So looking at the document I have now, I have layer 1, which has no name, and layer 2, which I'm now going to call wrinkled bag. All right, wrinkled bag. So wrinkled bag is on top of this beautiful woman's face, and when I start blending, darken will create a lot of dark marks, and multiply is going to mix them together much more like a projection, as opposed to lighten, which is going to create almost a solarized effect, versus screen. So those are two modes or two areas I use a lot when I'm blending. But for this I would probably not use any of those. I would use overlay to give this image a texture, or soft light. And it looks like the preference here is overlay. Can you guys see a difference? Is the screen looking like you can see a difference between these two? Okay, so what this tends to do with just this basic blending mode on top is to give some surface texture to the background and create a kind of a blended effect on top of the skin, which is not necessarily very glamorous looking, but does kind of add something to the background. It could very easily add a layer mask to this and minimize the amount of wrinklage in our character's face. But I just wanted to present that first as something really straightforward, and I'm going to hide that underneath my character's face here and go ahead and open up another example for blending, something that is not necessarily going to be as easy to work with, and that's going to be this, and that's this color pattern. Okay? So now I have something that's a lot more dramatic and clearly a lot more colorful, not monochromatic anymore. And I want to create the illusion of some kind of a painted face, a realistic-ish experience of these colors being rendered into the skin tone of the person. So again, I'm going to select all and copy and jump back to this image where I will again paste, edit paste, or Command V, and drop it up above. You notice how it went underneath because the layer, which was the paper layer, was the one selected. And again, I'm going to set this on overlay. Okay, so I get a really harsh mix, and it doesn't have to be this harsh. By using the blend if method and a little bit of masking, I can create a much better effect here than what I'm getting. This generic effect is really not suiting me. So to find the blend if commands, first I'm going to change the name of my layer here, and I'll call it pattern. I'm going to notice and point out that overlay is already selected or chosen for this layer. When I double click on the right side of this layer, it opens up the layer style control, which already has the blend mode of overlay applied. Yes? Okay. Now here are the two bars that I very rapidly described in my slides. And they're a little bit tricky to understand if you just use them with just a raw slider. This layer means the top layer, the pattern layer. You can see not really a lot is changing. Some of the color is changing. In other words, in the dark areas, I'm losing some of the color as I'm sliding the main shadow slider. And if I start sliding the highlight slider, you can see that the highlights are dropping out. Make sense? Okay. If I click on the underlying layer, one thing you should be aware of is that this will affect this layer and any and all layers that underlie this layer. So I do only have a two-layered project, But if I had more than 2 layers underneath this, could become kind of a conundrum and a little bit tricky to look at and understand because there's too much going on. So when you do this process, you really want to start with just 2 layers. Something on top that you want to blend into the thing on the bottom. So what it doesn't say anywhere in this panel, which makes this more of an advanced feature, is that you can, here we go, press the Option key and split these sliders. You notice how that bottom slider is now split away from its partner, which is anchored at the left side of the shadow area of the underlying layer. And if I do that same thing here, holding the Option key and I slide, you can see that now it's diminishing the intensity of the highlights. And if I slide back my shadow slider, you can see a little bit changing up in the hair. But again, if I go back to my highlight slider, I can increase or decrease the amount of reflection in the underlying layer. So that's number one. Number two, I'm going to put this back the way it was, is using the this layer command. In 9 times out of 10, the this layer command is going to give you the desired effect of allowing you to more selectively blend the color that you want, okay, knocking out the white here, into the background in a more subtle manner. So as you can see, some of the color is knocking out till I get to a certain point where these cross over. So I'm going to just find that sweet spot here. I'll try that again. I'm going to split this. There we go. Where the highlights just disappear. So I'm knocking out the white, which is actually now not going to affect the color on the face so much. And now the underlying layer, which is the face layer, I'm going to adjust it again. You can see what was happening before. And now the softness is coming much more. So we have a much more soft and tender effect with the color. That being said, there are still likely areas in this document or on this image where I don't want these to mix into the image. If I only want the hair, let's say, I only want the face and not the hair to have any of this color in it, what can I do? Well, one thing I can do is, again, I'm selecting this layer and I'm going to use Command T to resize it, to compress the color more into the area where the face is. So I'm going to zoom out a little more so I can get the handle. And I want the color to really only be in the skin tones. And when I was looking for this image, I looked for a pattern with the name of colorful zebra stripes. And I did this also in the CC search that I showed you a little while ago. I can see there's a black edge showing up here, so I'm going to trim that out from my color layer, and that is now gone. And now I'm going to set about making a mask. So I'm going to take a little bit of a segue now from looking at this content as it is to just doing your regular mask. For those of you who don't use a lot of layer masks, I am going to use the hack and slash method, which is first things first, I'm going to click to add the layer mask. And you can see that it's using the reveal all method, which is the white mask. Does this make sense to everyone who's used masks? And I'm going to switch now to a black brush. So over here in my color control or chip control, I've chosen a black brush and brush tool, which I'm going to make sure has hardness of 0. I don't know why this says hardness, why I can't just say softness and hardness, but hardness 0 would equal softness 100. True? Right? Okay. And now I'm painting. Where I want to make sure that I'm painting is on the mask. You can see up here it does say mask as opposed to if I'm on the color side, it's going to say RGB. All right. And the hack and slash method is basically where I take a brush, and here I've expanded the size of the brush using the right bracket key, and I must be in masking mode here, so let me turn that off, and I was in quick mask mode. And let me make sure that I'm actually on the right channel, because you can see red paint was showing up here, but now it's behaving, so life is good. So this is the hack and slash method. The hack and slash method is when I just start painting, and I'm seeing what's happening here. It's not a bad idea for us to take a quick look here at the channels palette and notice that that is the layer that is on channel panel mask. Okay, so now I have a masked version of this image, and it's really using more of a gray color. I'm going to undo that several times here. Back out, make sure I've selected the mask and that I'm painting on the RGB layer and not seeing the pattern mask. All right, so now what we should see happening, and something is happening here, is I'm on the mask and my layer is on overlay, but my mask is also being affected by the fact that that's on overlay. So be very aware of what is selected when you're masking. So there's the hack and slash method again. All right, simple masking technique for that. Any questions so far? Anyone have any questions on what's going on? Everyone's good? All right, so that part you knew, right? Everyone knew how to do that?
Click on the white, the mask, the bottom one, and not the top RGB one.
Right, we're actually making a mask, and a mask creates a window, like a stencil. Are you familiar with a stencil, which would be like a piece of paper with a number or something cut out, and then you put it down on something in spray paint? So this is creating a mask, or the illusion of content being cut out from the image, but it's a non-destructive edit, meaning if I want to bring this back, press the X key on my keyboard. Here, if I have these defaulted to black and white, notice how the two chips are changing. I'm pressing the X key, and if I paint with white, it's going to bring back or unmask this area, and if I press X again, it's going to mask this area. So it's filling the mask area, or the mask itself, with black to hide that content. And again, I'm on overlay, and if I double click, I have applied the if blending commands. Okay, so you can also notice that you can get even more fine-tuned with this if you're looking for just to blend into red, or blend with green, or blend with blue. But for this example, I'm just going to use the main grayscale content of the mask. And here I'm just softening it up a little bit more. All right. With that done, I can also use the same mask that I'm painting on to not have any stripes in the eyes, and maybe also not on the mouth. Right, this is really just to demonstrate a very basic layer mask, where some of the content that's being layered into the content below is masked out, and using a simple blending mode. Let's look at another way of creating a mask and extracting the content. But I'm going to do that now with the same file, and I'm going to talk more about, instead of basic masks, more complex masks, or in other words, using this concept of calculations. Now, if you take a look on screen, one of the things I tend to encourage people to do is to duplicate a layer that they're working on, just in case you want to hide a layer to keep it intact. If you decide that you want to make major edits to a layer, it's a good way of having something already in the file that you can come back to. It's a little backup non-destructive editing method, and I'm going to make sure that that second layer of my character's face is hidden behind other content, and that that layer is selected. Okay. The idea here is I want to be able to isolate the hair or the face. In other words, be able to create masks or alpha channels that I can use as layer masks to create more specific effects. Okay, so how is that done? Well, if you've ever worked with the channels before, the channels represent the red, green, and blue components of the RGB image. And these channels contain grayscale information which depicts how much of each of the assigned color channel actually project through that mask or stencil. These really are like negatives. If you have heard of the subtractive color method versus the additive color method, what's happening in RGB is the colors are overlapping and canceling each other out. So if you notice, the most contrasty in the face is the red. And the green and the blue are very similar. You might argue as to which one has the most contrast compared to the red. I would say it is actually the green. But in most cases, it won't be green. I'm going to show you what happens with these different mixes when we start blending them. So what you're looking at to start with is to create a mask that allows you to separate out parts of an image. You're going to use the calculations command, and before you start calculating, you want to look at and compare the contrast values of your RGB green, your RGB, or your red, green, and blue layers. All right, so now I'm going to head back over here to the RGB channel itself. And coming into the menu where I want to create this mask or new alpha channel, I'm choosing the choice of calculations. And here it is. Now, when you first open this menu, the dialog box for calculations opens up and it shows you the default settings, which are the first channel, which is red, being mixed into the second channel, which is also red, and it is using the blending mode of multiply. Now this for sure is a way to create a very rich black and white image, similar to when you use the black and white adjustments tool. But the main difference here between this method and the tool for black and white is you get more control. And once you understand what's happening here, we have the multiply mode multiplying two reds together, but if I have the multiply mode lightening each other, I'm going to start getting a very infrared or red filter effect, similar to the normal red layer. Instead of using this to start knocking out my contents, I'm going to switch the bottom source, or source 2, which is the same content, to green. And it doesn't look like I've done anything yet, but I'm about to change a couple of key settings. This is a formula that you can use or start with. And again, I'll be happy to share this presentation with anybody, and you can find the video on YouTube. But I'm going to go ahead and click on the invert, and all of a sudden something really interesting starts to happen. This is very much like a solarized print. If anyone worked in the darkroom with black and white, okay, so this is what would happen if you did a really quick flash to your developing sheet of paper. You can, if you're really good at it, use methods of experimentation to create a timed effect. But this is also not really what I want to have happen. The blending mode that I'm going to use is overlay. And as I begin to change the settings for my green channel, I'm going to switch it to blue here. You can see I'm getting a similar but not the same effect. I can also control some of the other factors. So how much is blending into what? So right now I'm looking at these two contrasting channels, red and green, and as I choose different choices for them, you'll see different methods or different visions of the channel appear. I'm switching that to add now, and now you're like, well, how is that helpful? That's actually a really good hint, because what's happening now is the red and green are canceling each other out when I add them together, and that means that they are using the opposites. So where one is dark, the other is light. And if I use subtract, now I start to see some separation occurring. And this is what you're going for. You're looking to be able to pull out, in this case, the hair versus the face, and still have shaded area that you can retouch using a couple of other tools. There is this thing called the offset value. Now what this value does is it makes either the content that you're looking at either lighter, more intense, less intense, or darker, more intense. So as I lower this number or raise this number, the effect is really different. So at 2, the offset, image is very dark. You can click in this field and actually use the up arrows on the keyboard, and you can see it's increasing to now 45. If you hold the shift in the up arrow, now I'm really starting to see some excellent detail in the hair, and the features of the face where they're highlighting are really separating out quite clearly from the rest of the face. So this is what we're going for. We're trying to create a mask with which we can then project or mask into places that would be really almost impossible to select otherwise and have be a smooth selection. So as I continue increasing the number of the offset, the image is becoming what we would say in photography more flat. I'm losing contrast. And as I go back down, I'm going to gain that contrast again. And I'm going to stop this just at, I'm looking right up here in this region where I have some hair detail, just at about 55, 60, I'm going to round it down to 60. Now this number scale doesn't do a whole lot, but because there's only two options here, you can see if I try to click away here, it should actually warn me. If I close this, it would tell me I can only use one or two. Two tends to make things softer, as if you're using a lower number paper in photography, if you're familiar with contrasty papers, and one is a much more high contrast look. So I'm going to go with two because it's a little bit more subtle. And the output that I'm making is a new channel. Okay, so that is a new channel. What can I do with that new channel? Well, let's talk about that. Everyone good so far? Yeah? Question?
Yeah. So when you were in the other that panel that you just closed, you said source 1, and it's like red, source 2, it's in green, click inverse. Was it because you said you had like layers separated?
I was looking at the channels initially and looking for the two that looked like they were the most contrasty against each other. Looking for contrast. Which two look the most different from each other? So it's kind of a toss-up because blue and green were really similar. And I experimented, obviously, with this file before I came here tonight. And I got a better effect from using green. But in most cases, you're going to use red and blue. And I'm going to do another one after this, and you'll see. This is one of those things that once someone shows it to you and you have a jumping off point, then you know how to begin doing your own experimentation with your own images. And that's why, again, I'm recording the session. All right, now here is my mask. And I made a copy of it just to be safe and non-destructive. And here is what I can do. I'm looking at this alpha 1 copy of the image, and I'm going to zoom in a little. And what I want to have happen is, scary, I know, I want to remove the face. I actually want to create a faceless face or partially a faceless face so I can show you how that is done, what the other two tools are that you're going to need to do this. One tool that you can use is the brush tool. And the brush tool, again, we are looking at this alpha channel 1 copy of this new creation that we made by calculating channels. And I'm going to go to the brush mode, and I'm going to change the mode to the mode of overlay. And by using this method of overlay and painting, it's darkening without actually painting black. You can see how it really wants to keep those highlights. Notice that? So everything that is 75% black and below is actually changing color or becoming darker. And if I paint through this area, it's going to want to keep these highlights bright where they're brighter than 75 and paint them out where they're not. So I'm actually going to undo that a couple times and just bring back one eye. I know, it's frightening. And then I'm going to remove the nose here and zoom out, Command minus. Notice if I paint with this back here, it's going to turn that all to black. I don't want that. X will bring this to white. And now I'm getting some really excellent differentiation. This is the big aha, because this would allow me to really separate these strands of hair from the background. This is kind of a huge deal, being able to use this brush. Again, it's a white brush. I'm using it on the overlay method or mode, and it's simply painting on this alpha channel, and it's finding that 75% or below, and it's allowing me to make a very clean or separated strand-like mask. right? How painful would that be if you had to select that with the lasso tool? You couldn't do it, or the pen tool. It would be impossible. So with this method and this simple brush, I can start creating a very interesting complex effect. Now, sometimes what I will do at this point, I want to be honest, there's really not that many times where I will just use this by itself. I will take this and I will duplicate it again. Now I have two of these that are the same. And on one, I'm going to completely obliterate the face. And then on the other, I'm actually going to invert it. And you'll see why in a moment, okay? There are things that you'll notice and learn in Photoshop as you get more advanced that initially seem really weird. But as you start thinking about color more in Photoshop and what color can do, you start realizing that there is a relationship between Photoshop and math. In other words, the colors on the channels can be multiplied or divided, or in other ways calculated. That's the method that we're using to extract information or data from these 8-bit channels. And channels are 8-bit representations of the color that is being used to mix together to make the final image. Okay, so as I said, I wanted to invert one of these, and I'm going to do that, Command-I. And now I have this. And what I'm less concerned about in this layer is the hair. So I'm going to do a hack and slash here. I'm going to go and put this back on normal. Okay, and I'm not going to try to paint this perfectly, guys, because it would just be painstakingly watching me do that. I'm going to do a good job, but I'm not going to freak out if it's not perfect, because it's really just about showing you the method. So I'm now using not a 100% hard brush, and I'm hand painting this, which is maybe not the most accurate method. An accurate method might be, or more accurate method might be the click and shift click method. I'm holding the shift key down, and what that's doing is allowing me to connect the dots of where I click to where I then click. Notice how that's filling really quickly now. So I want to block out this whole portion. And I still want to have a portion or another layer where I can just work with the hair itself. Okay? Now I will zoom in, Z. I am not a fan of scrubby zoom, so my scrubby zoom is turned off. I don't usually use scrubby zoom. I use a click and drag zoom. That's my favorite way to zoom. And again, I'll go back to my brush tool. And with the left bracket key, which resides to the left of the P, I'm decreasing the size of my brush. And again, I'm click, hold the shift key down, and I'm connecting these clicks together to quickly hack this out. All right, that ought to do it. I'm going to zoom out again, and I want to create the opposite of this to be pretty much all white. So that's pretty easy to do at this point, right? So I'll take the magic wand tool and select all the black content here and choose Select Inverse. Press the letter X to put the white chip in the foreground, and Option Delete. Now it looks like, what's the big deal? Maybe I could have done that with the pen tool. I might have been able to do it with the pen tool, but this method is going to ensure that when I bring the hair back into the composite, it'll be registered or completely lined up exactly where I want it. So far, so good? Yeah? All right, now to paint something with this. So I'm going to go back over to my RGB layer and let you see a couple of things. Number one is I'm going to do a quick checking myself. The alpha 1 copy, which is called 7, that's going to be changed. I'm going to call that hair reverse. And then alpha copy, the other alpha copy, I'm going to call this one just left versus right. Okay? So you'll be able to remember what they are. And back up to the RGB layer. Now, there's a lot of amazing things that we can do right now. In terms of putting content into this image, I'm going to come back over to my Layers panel and open up yet another image. And the image that I'm going to open up is going to be a cityscape, and that is the SF skyline. And here it is. Now, if you look at this image, you can see that the sky itself has blue in it, and there's very little, maybe just a little bit of blue in this image underneath. Are you with me? Are you breathing? Okay? It's getting exciting here. If we look at this image's R, G, and B layers, you can see something very specific happening when you look at it, right? Do you see what I see? If you look at the red layer, you can see that it has a real lot of contrast between the sky and the bottom part of the image. So if you take a look at alpha 3, which is like, wow, how'd that get to be so dark? I basically did the same thing that I just showed you. Let me show you again. This is a quick review of the calculation, okay? And even a little bit more simpler terms, because this image is more simple. So I'm going to choose calculations, and all of a sudden it's canceling itself out because it's red on red. I'm going to choose red on blue and invert, and ooh ah, it's starting to happen. You can already see the bottom and the top of the image starting to separate. Having to draw this skyline with the pen tool or select it with the magic wand tool will probably create a fairly inaccurate result. However, if we start changing some of the values now that we have in our offset, if we raise the number, we start to see this gray itself is standing out against a darker gray of the sky, and it's also really good. I mean, you can check all these different modes here, but if you switch between add and subtract, what are you going to see? An invert and not inverted. And these are the different steps that you want to take to play with and find that spot, or that sweet spot on a particular image where you start seeing the bottom and the top, or the negative and the positive that you want to separate out. If I change the scale to 1, there is that contrast factor that I showed you earlier. Remember before we were looking at this? 1 versus 2. So this is a way that I can start separating this image out. It is not a perfect science doing this. It is going to take some fidgeting. You may need to play with your offset, increasing and decreasing this number. Again, increasing this number, 150, is going to make the contrast greater, and decreasing this number is less contrast. So I'll bring it up higher this time to 300. Bring it up to, where was it, 150 was a good number. All right, that's where I'm going to leave off, and I'm going to click OK. So that is one other way that you can start separating out your imagery. Last point on this, I'm going to go back to the layer, and that is to show you what you're doing. If you take a look, when you go to select, such as select by color range, select color range, you can see I was in here earlier. I'm going to reset everything. Select by color range essentially is helping you to pinpoint specific areas of an image, and it's a much more harsh way or a quick way of separating, in this image, the top from the bottom, but you can also prove out here that there's this blue color in the bottom here. So using this highlight slider here, I'm choosing to pick the sky, and then with the add a color, I'm slowly adding to the selection. And now again, I have just the marching ants, and I can do select. Save selection, and I'll call this buildings. All right. I'm going to inverse the selection and copy it, Command-C. And back to the face image here. Okay. Now I'm going to load, I'm going to take this stuff because it's a little confusing, and in fact I'm going to take it out of the document for now, just so this is a little more simple for you to look at. And I'm going to go to loading my existing channels that I made. I'm going to choose load selection, and here is my hair reverse, and I'll click OK. Now you can see the marching ants doing their job all around the image. It may be something you want to try to make it easier for yourself to understand what's happening here, but I just added a new layer, and I could ostensibly fill this with a color and then undo it to see what's going to happen. So everywhere it's black is where it's going to now get filled. I'm going to undo that. With this new layer selected and the alpha channel applied to it, I'm going to do Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into. And what that will do is it will create a layer mask using the calculated channel and put it right into place in register on top of the colored image. And it's there, okay? And I'm moving it. You can see it back here. You see it in here. You can see it where it is and not where it isn't. All right, so it's really large. Command T. I'm going to scale it down, zooming way out. Move it over. Zoom back in. Same thing again. I'm actually just going to slide it over and really, really make it a heck of a lot smaller, and that's what I'm going for. So now, in these areas only of the hair, or mostly only of the hair, I have my content. All right? So by being able to adjust my calculation so that I have a very strong contrast between not just the face and the hair, but between the hair and the background, I can use the negative space left in the hair to adjust the color. All right, so I really want this to be a lot more colorful and a lot more exciting, so I'm going to add something to this now, which is going to be another important factor, and this is an adjustment layer. If you don't already use adjustment layers and you just use adjustments, adjustments are great, but the beauty of adjustment layers lies in their ability to be endlessly tweaked without actually truly changing the data. So you are doing a non-destructive edit when you're working with a hue saturation or a levels or a color adjustment layer. And here I'm going to kick up the saturation. But here's the problem with this, is that it is actually affecting not just the layer that I want to change the color of, which is the skylight content, but also the face beneath it. The way to avoid this is to do what is called to clip. This little button right here, it is so minuscule and tiny, you can hardly see it. This will actually allow the color effect to only be applied to the layer underneath it and not to the layers underneath that layer. So when I click this, now it's only affecting the sky. Does this make sense to everyone? Am I going too fast? No one's moving their head yes or no. No one wants to admit anything. Any questions so far? Is this making sense? Move your body. Yes? Okay. I'll be happy to go over it again. We're doing great on time. All right, so I would never in a million years be able to select this out with the pen tool. But being able to extract that from the mask is pretty exciting. So I want to change the colors. And in fact, not only do I want to change the colors, right, I want to, let's get them in more of a happy blue mode. I want them more blue. So now I'm happy with blue. Blue is great. I can lower the saturation a bit, or not. And I'm going to click away. Click away. So closing this panel. Click. There we go. All right, so now this little arrow here represents that it's clipped, and you can see it's actually tucked in. It's indented above the layer that's affecting it. If I click on the actual mask itself, again, that was generated by the calculated mask. I can use the black paintbrush to finalize this a little bit because I don't really want any sitting in her teeth. And I'm pretty happy with it. Now let's look at what I can do to that with the other mask I made. All right, so again, I need to probably flatten this. So I can, and again, composite something else into this, or maybe not. Let me show you what I'm going to do. All right, so this back layer now is showing us the transparent content of what is on my masked layer, and I'm going to click on it, making sure that I am selected on it. And again, I'm going to do load selection, and I'm going to choose left versus right. And now you can see clearly separating the left and the right of the image. I'm on this layer. I'm just showing you a quick adjustment to show you what's selected, and I will undo this. So I'm going to show you here left versus right, okay? So I start having a little bit more drama over here, which is good. I like that. So I can adjust that, but I really shouldn't do that, should I? No, I should use an adjustment layer. So here we go. I'm going to click on the cookie. I call that the cookie. And I'm going to go to the levels adjust here. And I'm going to increase the shadow information just on the left side of the image. It's looking good. And I'm using that as my layer mask. All good? All right, let's do one more thing to this because I cannot resist. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try one more layer on this and see what we can create. So the layer I'm going to use is the ocean layer. So this is a photo of Point Reyes from a few weeks ago. And again, the combination that I want to do is using both blending if now along with my layer mask. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to close this because I don't need it open anymore. And selecting the layer I want this to be above, which is the bottom layer, I will paste. V is for the move tool, and pretty close to what I want. I would like it a little taller. In general, I really do not recommend you stretching images larger than they initially are, but for this demo I think we'll be okay, so I'm going to hit the return key. So I did stretch it a little bit just to pique your interest. What would happen if I hid this layer, the skyline layer, and I selected the mask and I moved it down? All right, so now you can see how that same exact mask, which is not locked to the skyline layer, is now being employed instead for the ocean layer. I don't really want that, but you can move your masks. Instead of doing that, I'm going to do the following. With this layer selected, again, I'm going to load selection, and I'm going to use the hair reverse, but I'm going to use it on invert. So I am flipping this mask over. So the opposite thing is what is going to be selected. Not those strands of hair, not the background, not all those areas, but everything else but those areas. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that into a layer mask. Again, to do that, I click on the layer mask button. That was it. I just clicked on it. I know you're excited. Okay? So with the layer mask button, now I'm getting some pretty insane blending. It's a little over the top, and I want to turn my skyscrapers back on, and you can see this is a big nasty mess. And it's mostly a big nasty mess because I need to do something. I need to select the blend mode, right? I didn't put the blend mode on, and I'm going to use my friend overlay again. Okay, soft light or multiply. Again, lighten, okay? So where I want this to mostly occur, I'm going to go back to multiply for a moment here, is in the face, in the skin, without it looking like she has a disease. So I don't want her to, look like so freaked out, but yet this is just not really cutting it for me. It's just not giving me enough contrast. So here is where I'm going to start using my blend if controls. Ready? All right, here we go. So I'm going to double click. Let's see what we come up with. And remember, this is the underlying layer. This is a key portion of this right now because this is the bottommost layer. Perhaps you remember what I said earlier regarding that this was a little bit misleading because this is not just the underlying layer, but all layers underlying. And in this case, remember, this is the bottommost layer. So we're not going to get any other interaction, but you could if this wasn't the bottom layer. So again, if I just slide the sliders, okay, I'm losing it. If I press the Option key and I start splitting the slider, Okay, that is actually going to start creating a holding zone. And I'll split the highlight slider. Where I want to see it. What I want. I want it up here. See this water kind of coming in here and sloshing around the top of her eyes. So I'm going to leave that as such. And again, selecting this existing layer mask, and then I can simply increase the size of my brush and only put that layer where I want it. Okay, so now I have this effect on the eyes that wasn't there before. It's very subtle. And to amp that up a little, I could try a different blending method. I'm probably going to stick with this one, but just to show you some of these other lighting commands, such as hard light, you can really start seeing it better now. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. This is highly subjective. All right. I'm kind of digging vivid light. Right? So this is something that you would not be able to do if you didn't have these controls. All right. So any questions on anything that we've covered so far? You good? All right, I want to do another one now with a blending method. And I'm going to begin again with the same image. So I'm going to select this layer and hide everything else and just fine-tune this information so that you have an even deeper understanding. So again, I'm going to use the same image. But this time I'm going to use a completely different content for the overlay. And the content I'm going to use for the overlay is actually going to be this map. Okay? This map starts out with this kind of golden colors. I'm going to select all and copy it and close this window and paste. Command T to size it. And the first method I'm going to use here is going to be, again, the overlay method. But when you see this change happen, okay, so here we go. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to set it on overlay. Now, that looks a little scary. Like it's very crackly and kind of harsh and overdone. But I need these two things to really combine well. Well, I might consider, just before I start playing around with the blending mode, if I wanted to make a shift to the colors, and I'm doing this just right now in the regular hue saturation mode. I kind of like these warmer purple colors. So instead of doing it here to be safe